Good morning, and if you can hear a skill store outside, I do apologise. They're putting a fence in across the road. It's taking them forever. Bloody annoying. Anyway, good morning, everyone. Hopefully you've all enjoyed your truncated week and haven't gone too hard on the Easter chocolates. I tried to, but the child ate all mine. That's a lie. Welcome to this week's Auto Media Group Weekly Wrap. I'm Richard Edwards, and I'm joined once again by AutoTalk News editor Matthew Hansen. Wave your hand there, Matthew. And used car guru and a man who never ever sells a hybrid, Graeme Macdonald.
Morning, Richard. Morning, Matthew.
Morning, all.
For those listening to this as an audio file, Graeme just rolled his eyes in a very, very noticeable way. But anyway, let's get straight into the news. New Zealand hits near record inflation, fuel and used car prices spike. Rising cost in fuel and second-hand cars has contributed to the largest annual inflation rise in more than 30 years. The consumer price index increased 6.9% year on year in the March 2022 quarter, according to the latest data from Stats New Zealand. This is the largest movement since a 7.6% annual increase in the year to the June 1990 quarter. And can I say there, it's a totally silly thing, but I always love it that Stats New Zealand is called Stats New Zealand. If you go to any other country, it would be like the Bureau of Statistics and Measures and all this kind of stuff in New Zealand. Stats New Zealand. Anyway, moving on. Graeme, I mean, is used car prices how far are they up in the field? I mean, what are you seeing, or is this really maybe a measure of messing in the market with clean car and so on and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't speak for the new vehicle industry, but for the used car business, yeah, there's been pricing pressures for quite some time now, and look, it is primarily to do with the cost of fuel. I think CCD's probably not helped that either when it comes to putting inflationary price pressure upwards. But yeah, cars have got more expensive in Japan, or they have been over for quite some time, and there's definitely market pressure in New Zealand for certain stock too. Not everything. I mean, we're in a bit of a two-speed economy now when it comes to cars. Vehicles, obviously, that are affected by the CCD or the more fuel efficient at one end that are in demand. And at the other end, the bigger stuff, the fuel users, so to speak, the vehicles that are going to at some stage attract some sort of fee. I think that market's still a lot slower, and there may not be the same sort of inflationary pressures, but there's definitely been an increase in the cost of cars across the board.
Mm-hmm. I'd argue that it's a not entirely measurable thing, though, in that I do think in the last year we've potentially seen an increase in the quality of the vehicles that are arriving in New Zealand. Certainly the average age of those arriving has gone down. So it doesn't feel like we're just spending more for nothing. We're getting a little bit more for our money, maybe. Matthew, you spent a bit of time looking around. Any thoughts on that?
I do. I think, I guess what I'm quite curious about, and Graeme can probably speak to this more, is we've seen used car prices going up stories for the last sort of year and a half, probably longer. Is that something that is completely cut out by the dealer? Is that something that the dealer has in the past benefited from at all, or is it the price? Are the cars that they're acquiring also more expensive at their end too?
Oh, definitely, Matthew. I don't think anyone's making any more hay than they ever used to. Our market here is driven almost entirely by pricing pressures overseas. And whether that's by Kiwi dealers in Japan, for example, whether it's just by the state of the Japanese market, and that's obviously a field that I play in, so I can speak for that. We're not sort of making any greater margin on stock because the prices have gone up here in New Zealand. We're paying more for it, therefore we have to ask more for it. And in New Zealand, with your used car stock, if you're a dealership that deals primarily in New Zealand new, you're facing pressures just by the lack of available stock right now coming on through. And so naturally, when you go and purchase it either off your wholesalers or off trade auction, you're having to pay more for the same vehicle. So it's across the board. The stuff's just got more expensive to purchase. And as a dealer, you're not necessarily going to reap any reward for that in terms of your net profit per car. Where you may be taking advantage is the number of vehicles you can actually sell if you can obtain the stock.
Mm-hmm. Who do we blame? Is the government, COVID, Putin?
Cinder? I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot of pressures on it. Look, I'm a little bit nervous at the moment looking at inflation. This is a lead topic obviously this morning. And the market's really buoyant right now because people are out there trying to replace their vehicles concerned about petrol prices. There's the CCD, obviously. There's a bit of an upgrade of the fleet happening. If you look at the FOB price, for example, on stock coming in from Japan, there's been a huge lift over the last little while in the FOB value, which tells you sort of the caliber of stuff coming in. But the inflation party is not a happy one to be part of. And if we look back at sort of 2007, 2008 and what happened to the car industry, we don't want to be back there again. And I'm really concerned that we're going to see a drop away, a fairly sharp drop away at some point when people reach that point of unaffordability, whether it's their mortgage at home or the loan value, because we're going to see shifts in the finance rates being offered by the major financiers on stock. If you have a floor plan, for example, or you've got a large credit note with your bank for your stock, we're going to see those pressures really come home to bite. Not yet, but it's going to happen. And my concern is that the vehicle industry will suffer as a result when we see that slowdown.
Mm-hmm. And part of this too, the broader inflation thing at the moment is, we are coming out of an interesting time with COVID. We're seeing a lot of pressure on particularly the lower ends of the labour market. Shipping is up. It's not just one thing that's doing this. I'm not sure it's necessarily going to go away either in the short term, particularly pressure on wages. So we will see. Now, Toyota New Zealand has announced an Auckland hydrogen fleet partnership. Toyota New Zealand has announced the Hydrogen Project, a partnership with 8 other brands in Auckland as part of a hydrogen fuel cell trial, which sees numerous companies sharing a fleet of hydrogen-powered Toyota Mirais. The companies taking part in the program are The Warehouse in New Zealand, Saatchi & Saatchi, TVNZ, Becker, Westpac NZ, Spark, and Z Energy. This is an interesting one. Especially if you actually read through Toyota's literature, Toyota New Zealand admits themselves that hydrogen is not the way for the light vehicle fleet. They believe it's a broader topic around heavier transport and industrial equipment and so on and so forth, and they've actually become a distributor for hydrogen fuel cells that can go in anything, including things like the new hydrofoil Team New Zealand chase boats. Have you got any thoughts as to why they're pushing forward with a trial of a car they themselves admit is probably not the right thing for New Zealand, Matthew?
Yeah, it's a funny one. Part of me wonders whether it's they haven't necessarily got a shiny EV they can show us yet. We know the BV, the BZ4X. I'm still getting used to that name. Is coming here. But this is I guess maybe a more straightforward way to show people that they're on the front foot with something. I think it'll be quite interesting, the fleet side of it. I know that hydrogen, there's a lot of discussion about with the viability of it, but I think the fleet thing is also pretty interesting because you've got a fleet there. They didn't say how many vehicles are going to be in the fleet. They kind of teased maybe up to 100, but I highly doubt it'll be quite that many. But it'll be shared between all those different brands, which I think will be quite cool because, obviously we've seen more companies, particularly corporates, that, look at having their workforces work from home. So maybe less chance for or less need for fleet vehicles on demand all the time. I think how that's handled will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the shared fleet model it's something that's been done before. I mean, quite successfully, and particularly in Christchurch and now growing in Auckland with various companies doing that. And Toyota New Zealand actually already has its foot in the game of vehicle sharing. It's been a prominent shareholder of City Hop for a while now, and they also invested in a Wellington-based software company that does software that facilitates that. So, yeah, it's an interesting move. We've Toyota New Zealand boss Neeraj Lala's up in Japan at the moment with the PM's delegation. He's up there discussing that New Zealand really should get into the, and I use quotes because it's a very broad and delicate topic, green hydrogen market, where we should potentially be producing hydrogen here for export or for use in various ways. It's going to be interesting to watch how this goes. As I said, they say EV's still the way for light, but an interesting move. I personally probably think more of what Hyundai's been doing. They've brought down electric trucks, hydrogen trucks, and they're putting those out to trial, and I think they are probably closer to market than what Toyota's doing. But I guess I still laud Toyota for trying something, and we still don't all know the answers to what the future's going to be.
I was going to say, Richard, there's a point to this. I think there's a devil's advocate approach to take towards this. I mean, Toyota globally are masters at holding their cards very closely to their chest indeed. And we sort of talk about them being late to the party in technology with a lot of things they've done in the past, but the smart money has generally been Toyota waiting until the right time to introduce a product to market and letting the sort of, if you like, the early adopters of the early chips fall. And I wouldn't dismiss out of hand a strategy that Toyota have in betting hydrogen as an alternate propulsion method for the future of the fleet here in New Zealand. And effectively, like they're foxing right now in terms of what they're talking about with the numbers. But now isn't the right time to be showing any particular commercial hand around that either. I wouldn't write that off as a... and look, I'm open. I'm open to all these different ideas, whether it's hydrogen or it's EVs. I just think Toyota certainly aren't going to tell you the entire game plan that they have in their heads with 100 vehicles coming down for the fleet share program.
Here's a question, of course, Graeme, is that this means there's going to be some infrastructure in Auckland for these vehicles. Any temptation to grab a few cheap Mirais at auction in Japan?
Well, I don't know, they've actually been cheap. There's not a lot of them. You don't see them turn up very often. I mean, the numbers being sold in Japan were very, very small. I mean, for a while there was like, 20 a month being sold new or 40 a month. And I guess like anything, if you want to be the early adopter in that to sell them used, you probably have to have access to some of the technology yourself in terms of your own service and workshop of bits and pieces, because consumers are going to want to know, even if they are early adopters themselves, that the parts and servicing are available. And so I think that'll be the preserve of maybe a handful of dealers. I can think of a couple top of my head right now who have always been ahead of the market that might see this as an opportunity, but I think it's a very, very small one indeed. And you'll need to have the backup for it yourself.
Yeah. Another opportunity that someone is clearly looking at is Chery. Chery's edging closer to being back in the Australasian market. Chinese car manufacturer Chery appears set to relaunch in Australia and potentially also New Zealand as demand for more affordable electric vehicles grows. The rumor went into overdrive this week following the discovery that the brand is in the process of hiring personnel in Australia. Chery has advertised 2 Australian-based positions this week, Sales Director and Human Resources Manager, and it has not advertised any jobs in New Zealand so far that we know of, but we're seeing a lot with these Chinese companies more operating out of Australia and kind of branch officing it into New Zealand. Certainly what we're seeing with MG at the moment. And so this is going to be an interesting one because, Chery is a brand that's been here before. It did not have the greatest of times here previously with the Atiko, with the Neville Crichton's Atiko operation. But if you look overseas at Chery at the moment, they've got some interesting product and they are going particularly well in places like South Africa. They've got a new all-electric platform and, China and electric, it does seem to work. Matthew, will you be rushing out to buy a budget Chery, whatever it is, when it arrives?
Who knows, Richard? I think, the fact that I didn't just say no to that question probably highlights how far Chinese vehicles have come in terms of reception in this part of the world. You obviously have an MGZS. MGZS is, particularly the EV, has had massive penetration here in the new car market. The Tesla Model 3 is, a lot of them are Chinese made, and people, don't seem to mind that at all. I guess we all kind of saw this coming that Chinese cars are on the rise. I think it'll be really interesting.
And the BMW iX3.
Yeah, exactly.
Actually, there's a point. How many buyers of Tesla Model 3s know their car is built in China? They've bought into the whole, I'm buying a piece of American EV.
It's an interesting one, is that a lot of them do, and that's because it's broadly known that the Model 3 out of China is way better than the Model 3 out of the US.
Yeah.
Significantly better. They've largely stopped having to reassemble cars once they arrive to New Zealand now, because they're switching to out of China. The meter long panel gaps on the American stuff was pretty average. Look, I think from what I've seen of the product that's selling overseas, Chery is probably going to be a good little option here. Haval's had such a good run into the market at the moment, and their vehicles aren't bad. I'm not quite sure the Cherys are up to that level. The Havals are a premium product in China, and so they live a bit more up to New Zealand standards. But we'll see, and there's certainly a market for cheap electric vehicles if they can land electric vehicles and petrol vehicles. I think they should just go straight to the electrics and avoid all the issues that you get with a petrol motor, to be honest. And it's a good way for a brand to come in, and it will actually build a different market, as opposed to those people who remember the Chery J1 and the Chery Tiggo and
They were, and at risk of being taken out the back and shot or land with a large lawsuit, they were terrible. As a used vehicle dealer, I can tell you right now, one of those turns up for a trade-in was sort of direct them down the road to pick apart because you can't get parts for them. It's not the engines, it was just the quality of the assembly, the plastics, the degradation, the paint, corrosion in places. We didn't even know cars could rust within 2 years so quickly. Well, yeah, the Cherys did. So from the industry perspective, we talk about brands that are not well received by the trade, that would be in my top 3 brands that you just wouldn't want to touch with a 40-foot barge pole. So there needs to be, I think, a large rebuilding aspect going on with certainly the industry and potentially the public that had less than happy experiences with the 3-year-old Chery. We've talked about some unusual brands making a return to market over the last couple of podcasts. And some, I would say, have got a good chance based on previous experience. This one, I'm going to give a solid Graeme -1, and I would like to be proven wrong, but I'm going to hedge my bets and sit on the fence.
I have a couple of funny memories of the J1s. No, I was one of the first to see the J1s when they arrived at a Tico's showroom, their warehouse, and when it was up on the Great South Road in Mount Wellington, and they came in all wrapped in plastic like they were Chinese imported dishes. Yeah, they were an interesting little vehicle. There were a couple of funny things. They were so cheap for a while that when they were getting near the end, that I think one of the dealers was, I'm not sure if he was trading scooters or matching the payments on a scooter to sell you a J1. And basically they saw themselves competing with 50 scooters. And then the other one was
scooter, thanks.
One of the urgent courier companies in Auckland actually was helping a lot of their drives into them for their little short run stuff around Auckland, because the theory being was they would just burn one a year and it was still cheaper than owning another vehicle and servicing it and so on and so forth. So who knows? There's always a market for something.
Wait and see.
Yeah. It was better. The Chery did better than Geely did on its first run to New Zealand. Put it that way.
It was number 2 on the list.
Now, in some not so good news for some dealers, for some truck dealers specifically, Iveco has consolidated its sales in New Zealand. So Nelson-based Star Trucks International, Hamilton-based Wholesale Commercial Vehicles, Advanced Equipment Otago and Southland will cease to sell on-highway Iveco trucks and daily vans in the next 6 months as the brand consolidates all sales operations to its Auckland dealership. Iveco Group says it wants to form close relationships with New Zealand customer base following its recent market spin-off from the C&H Industrial Group and the announcement of the closure of the truck's assembly plant in Dandenong, Victoria, Australia. Now, this is an interesting one. In that it's kind of showing a progression from a number of brands in the truck market in New Zealand, and I think we have and will see more of this at the upper end of the New Zealand car industry, where they are realizing, particularly when they are Australian headquartered, that they think they can get away with reducing down the number of representatives they have in New Zealand, and that we don't mind travelling, and that we're only a market of 5 million, so we must be the same as Melbourne, and ... It doesn't always go hideously well.
Look, I've got a friend of mine in the transport industry. He's got a reasonably large fleet, and I've got to say, when it comes to service, they buy new trucks. When it comes to customer service, we think that we are demanding as an industry for cars when it comes to customer service ongoing, but we've got nothing on the transport industry, where you've literally got an investment worth between $200,000 and $700,000 on the road earning you money. Every single day that vehicle is not available for service, or it's got a hold up with parts or service or specification, it can be catastrophic. And so service and the ability to call up on the phone or the internet and get whatever it is you need sorted out in a hurry sorted is paramount. I think that's been the undoing, I hear, of a couple of different, I won't mention names, but I think there's at least one manufacturer, one distributor here that's got a bit unstuck with that model so far, where they just, I think, underestimated how valuable that relationship becomes to their customer base. Clearly, Iveco's worked out, or they think they've worked out what they can get away with, or what might be suitable for their ongoing relationships. But oh man, I'd be exercising caution on that one.
They've invited those dealerships to remain service outlets, but I guess the question is whether those companies will still have the same passion for the brand when they can't sell you one. And
yeah,
that's
a relationship is really so important in that field.
Mm-hmm. And I think potentially, certainly with the, the daily van is an interesting one. The daily van kind of doesn't have a competitor in New Zealand. But certainly at the smaller end of their truck market, I just think they're risking companies like, Fuso and Isuzu and others that do still continue to rely on regional dealers to distribute, are just going to eat the market. People do like dealing with someone close by. So yes. Now the last one of the day, and one that I think needs a little bit of clarification. What we've heard is that Tesla is to stop including charging cables in its cars. Tesla CEO Elon Musk has announced on Twitter that future Tesla products won't include a charging cable as standard, stating that user statistics were super low, so it seems wasteful. You can still buy one. We haven't actually had confirmation yet as to whether that will actually happen to New Zealand. It's only been confirmed for the US market. I think it's the right idea. They're not the first to do it. I know some people jumped around saying, "Oh, Tesla's being forward with this." Well, others have done it before. Mazda doesn't supply a charging lead with their cars. Lexus doesn't supply a charging lead with their cars. Audi supplies a charging lead. It's actually a dual stage charging lead that you can bolt to the wall and use as a high power home charger. So nothing new, but I think it's a good idea because realistically, a wall lead with a car with a 60, 70 kilowatt hour battery is as useless as tits on a bill. It is going to take about 3 days to charge the bloody thing. So you may as well go and spend the $2,500 to install a charger at home. And arguably, if you're going out and buying a 60, 70, 80, $100,000 EV, then you can afford that. Now, at the bottom end with something like this, an MG, maybe, but also not. And if I go on a pet peeve rant here, one thing I've noticed lately is these leads being, am I really loud? Being locked to cars. So charging on pretty much every EV that comes to the moment sticks to the same standard, CCS standard. And we've got leads coming out that theoretically are applying to a standard, so should be able to be used with every vehicle that applies to that standard. And that used to be mostly the way, but lately I've noticed that BMW have locked their vehicles, so they can only use their charging leads. Same with Mercedes. We've got an aftermarket ratio charging lead for our MG that lives to the same standard as those, but that's not been allowed to charge those other cars. And that's slightly annoying because if you have these things and you allow them to be broadly used anywhere, that creates a secondary market for them. They're not just going to become e-waste, and there is a lot of metal in those things. A lot of metal and plastic. It's a dumb move. Those chargers could, if they were supplied but weren't locked, could be sold back into the market to be used with used import lease, and thusly we don't have to, it saves issuing those as well. It's just, supplying leads, not necessary. Locking leads to a particular brand of vehicle, dumb move. That's my rant.
Well, okay, so riddle me this, Richard. And I kind of know the answer, but I'm going to throw it out there anyway. Why is it that within the used import dirty old industry that we get lined up and shot at dawn if we don't provide a charging cable for every single PHEV or EV that we import and bring in? Like it's the end of the world. How could you possibly not supply with a charging lead? But it's okay if it's a Tesla.
Well, that's just customer expectation, I guess.
Oh, please. Really?
and a home when you're selling a Leaf or an Outlander, a home charging lead is all you need. Different kettle of fish. I think you're better off not supplying one than what a lot of you have done in the past.
No.
Chop the plug off at the end and screw on another one from Bunnings, which is...
No.
I think one of the other things is that a lot of people who are buying Teslas these days are probably early adopters who are well read on all of the charging paraphernalia, that all of the best options. Whereas towards the used market and towards I guess the MG market, you're dealing with a lot of people who are still feeling their way through things. So in some ways, I think that adds to the justification of Tesla. It's a bit like Apple, where a lot of the people who are buying Apple products already have charging cables, already have that stuff from the previous iPhone or the previous Mac they had or whatever. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, you don't get a charger with your iPhone anymore. The theory being they should all be the same, and you buy one that suits your needs. That's my position. I think it's just supplying chargers on new EVs just creates waste. But look, Graeme, I personally think that if you're selling EVs in your used market, then take the stand. Don't supply a charger. If it doesn't come with a charger in the boot that's legal for New Zealand from Japan, don't supply the charger. But have options there to buy them. That is the better option, and people can choose the quality and choose the type they want. And that's an added
you try
layer.
That, Richard. Yeah,
that is an added layer of dealership margin in it, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I know. Look,
it's the ideal.
Yeah.
You take these chargers right now that Tesla has done this, everyone will do it. Everyone is in the new market is going to drop their chargers in the next year. Same in the used market. If you go and just start doing that, and I suspect that there are some of the more EV focused guys who have looked at this, it'll cascade down. But it goes back to that old argument, is that dealers, as EVs come in, particularly those who service vehicles, are going to lose business from them needing to be serviced less and so forth. Well, where do you make your margin back? Sell them a charger. Sell them a charger that's appropriate. And that goes back to a whole other argument about selling used vehicles, is there's people going, you just need to take it home and plug it in, and that's it, that's fine. Well, that's such a short-sighted way to sell a vehicle. You should be saying, this lead can do this, but realistically, look, we can sell you with our partner electrician this charger for X amount, and this will allow you to charge it in this time, which will fit your use case better than just using the lead that's supplied, rather than here's a plug, bugger off out the door. I don't want to know you anymore.
I'm not sold, Richard. It's I might be old school here, but it's kind of like taking a customer out to the yard and saying, there's your nice shiny new Acura. You want tires? We don't sell tires. It comes extra with tires. You want some tires for it as well. Some wheels.
That's an extreme case.
I know. Maybe I was being brought up in that marketplace from the earlier days when we brought in used Leafs, where the expectation of a cable was absolutely paramount. And if you didn't supply one, it was pretty much end of days, and customers would either stamp their feet until you did, or they'd walk and find somewhere else. And now I know there's differences between used and new. I get all that. No, I'm not sold.
A home charger on a 24 kilowatt Leaf is about 15 hours. A home charger on a Tesla Model 3 is about 3 days. So,
hey, go the Leaf, right?
Exactly.
I just want to say there's nothing that gives me more joy than just seeing Graeme silently shaking his head, just watching the volcano building. It's great. It's wonderful.
There's nothing that gives me more joy than the fact that we have 2 people watching this live at the moment. If you're there, then please comment, and if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, check a comment underneath so that we can see it pop up in the StreamYard.
It's probably your mum's.
Yeah. Yeah. Sally, stop watching me. Awesome. Look, well, we will wrap that up for today. That has been, as usual, way longer than it really should be, but that's okay because we had a bit of fun. Don't forget to subscribe, like the Facebook page. It'll let you know when we're going to do these in advance. It's not my mum, apparently. It's not sure if I can say who you are, but thank you for watching. Now, a last little bit of news from us today. Today is finally, months late, but we made sure we had to get this right. The launch day for Fleet Talk, our new magazine focusing on the fleet industry. So please do go to fleettalk.co.nz. The magazine will be uploaded there this afternoon. Again, put your email down on there for news updates and a magazine from there. It's exciting because we finally get to properly review cars that aren't EVs, Matthew. Yes. And there's some of Matthew's amazing photography in there. So go read that, enjoy it, and we'll make sure that we announce when that's actually up there through all our other channels as well. So thanks for joining us. That's with me, Richard Edwards, Matthew Hansen in the middle there, and Graeme Macdonald, who's going to go and sell some people some not hybrids.
Yeah, with cables. Have a good Anzac weekend, everyone. Don't forget, Mondays are no-go. Don't be that guy. Don't do the Anzac Day thing. Don't be that guy.
Yep. Agreed. Catch you later.